Hey there, guys. Got a few questions, so I'll rattle them off, the ones that I'm going to answer. So there was knee pain and squats, deloading and maintaining strength, and the other one was glute and hamstring developments without specifically training for it using too many exercises. So let's start with knee pain and squats. For me, I've run into it a few times before. Excuse the cough, still recovering. Um, for me, knee pain on squats will happen if I try and drop too quick on the way down and my knees buckle in and then I have to push them back out. Now, if I do it for like 1 or 2 reps, I don't run into any problems with it. When I was doing the front squat every day program, the sets of 20, it was more the amount of volume, and if you're trying to get through the reps because it's tiring you out and your form breaks down a bit, having 10 reps where your knees sort of break in, then you're pushing your knees back out, it's not ideal. It's that slight wear and tear over time. Now, I was doing that every day, so 10 poor reps in a week, not too bad, but 70 poor reps in a week, you can see where the problems start to occur. So, if you're developing knee pain and squatting, a lot of it has to do with technique generally. A lot of people just look at the knee, but the thing that you need to realize is your hips dictate where your femur then moves. So if your femur's, going out and in, your knee joint's the thing copying, the problem, versus the actual mechanical issue generally, not always, but generally starts at the hip because you're not stabilizing properly. So I'd look at some stabilizing movements for the hip joint, because if your hips are stable and everything's held in place, your knees aren't flying around. The other big one is people have their knees travel too far over the toes. Look, there's pros and cons to it. Some people can get away with it and others can't. I'm definitely in the group of people that can't get away with it. So for me, it's about pushing my knees out to the side, which in fact unlocks my hips, then causes me to descend, and then I push my hips slightly backwards like I'm sitting down. That way I can activate glutes and hamstrings a lot more and get a lot more stability, and I can squat down further. Versus if I tried moving at the knees first and squatting down, my knees have to travel too far forward. You can play around with it, just with no weight on your back, and you'll see what will happen if you have excessive knee travel forward versus braking heavily at the hips and sitting back. Very, very big difference. And if you have issues with that, then you're looking at working on your mobility, working on strengthening your lower back and hamstrings and glutes. Which then brings me to the second point: strengthening glutes and hamstrings while not specifically using too many exercises. So for me, I'm a very quad dominant squatter, and in the off season I rarely back squat. I nearly always front squat. Now, I was asked, how do I maintain glute and hamstring strength and size if I'm only front squatting? Like anything, you adjust the movement to suit your individual needs. So when I front squat and I want to hit glutes and hamstrings more, I'll take a slightly wider stance. So one that's going to hit a lot more adductors, because you're taking a wider stance. When you break past parallel, say on a front squat, and you're keeping very upright, your adductors are now put on a significant level of stretch. In a way, they're sort of acting as a wannabe quad for the first 2-3 inches of the movement, trying to come back up because they're on stretch so significantly. The same thing is also true of the hamstrings and glutes. So what I try and do is take that wider stance, but then I go down and I pause the rep, because that way I can hold tension. I don't spring out the base. I'm not trying anything crazy, especially because I'm in a stance that's already quite weak for me, just with how I'm put together. So with that wider stance, I can feel hamstrings and glutes working plus adductors, and you can shift your feet around, with each rep. You might want to point your toes out slightly more. You might want to keep them more at, say, 25 degrees. Play around with what works for you, and also play around with the amount of hips coming back at the start of the movement. If your hips aren't coming back much, you're going to feel a lot more in your quads. If you're able to push your hips quite far back and keep your chest upright, I find I can feel a lot more in my glutes and hamstrings, which works really well. But at the start of the movement on the way down, because of the angle, I feel it a lot in my mid to lower back because it has to work really, really hard to hold, this sort of angle. Then what else from there? Yeah, you play around with the exercise to get what you need. So front squats done with a really wide stance and pause, you're definitely going to feel it in glutes and hamstrings. Versus let's look at another lift and change it. So if you had bench press, and you took a really, really narrow grip, it's going to become more a tricep movement. So you're heavily working your triceps. Take a really wide grip, you're going to be working your chest a lot more thoroughly. You take sort of a shoulder width grip, you're going to get an equal amount of chest, shoulder, and tricep. It's just an exercise. How you then put your hands is going to dictate where it hits the most. And the same holds true then with the front squat or traditional back squat, if you will. Why the front squat over back squat? Sometimes I don't always have the best mobility to get in position for a back squat. So, front squatting for me is easier in that regard, but I also like the fact I got to keep my chest a lot more upright on a front squat because that helps develop my abs and lower back a lot more than what I get out of a traditional back squat. Then let's have a look at like deadlifts as well, taking the same sort of logic. If you have a conventional deadlift, you're going to use a lot more of your, back in general versus, you're still deadlifting, but if you move your feet all the way out to the side like a sumo deadlift, well, your lower back's not going to cop it anywhere near as hard, and it becomes a lot more, glutes and adductors, hamstrings, it changes the lift significantly in terms of the muscles used. Yes, it's still a deadlift. The bench press, narrow grip bench press is still a bench press. Squats, front squat, back squat, it's still a squat. So how you go about adjusting each of the movements is going to dictate heavily what you're going to work. So for me, as I said, I really hit hamstrings and glutes very hard when I take a wide stance, front squat and pause it. Then the last one was deloads. When you deload, try and view it more as you're not necessarily going to lose a lot of strength. Your movement pattern may not be perfect because you're not putting the same amount of load on your back. So from a neurological standpoint, yes, there's going to be a little bit of a drop in performance. But in terms of like local muscular hypertrophy, you're still training your muscles using other things. So an example would be, if you're trying to build, and we'll use a really easy example, if you're trying to build the strength on a front raise, so grabbing something and front raising it up, you don't necessarily have to do that movement in order to get ridiculously stronger. You could overhead press as well. You're still working the delts. They're still getting stimulation. They're still going to grow, but it's going to take a few weeks to get your movement pattern for a front raise back to exactly where you wanted. When you front raise as well, there's going to be a lot of scapular, hopefully retraction if you're doing it properly. So there'll be a lot in the way of upper back stability. You can still get a lot of upper back stability and strength by doing, your pull-ups, your chin-ups, your rows, things like that. You don't necessarily have to use the movement you're going for. And the same is true when you get injured or you're deloading from squats. The fact that I'm not doing a competition back squat, front squat, I'm still working my quads, I'm still working my hamstrings, and I'm still working my glutes. The actual load going through my, spine is a lot less. If you're one of those lifters and you sort of freak out that you don't have a heavy weight on your back, you could always load up, 80 to 90% of whatever your back squat was, and just do a rack hold, just stand up with it on your back so you keep that feeling of weight on your back. But don't try and squat it. The whole point is to give yourself a deload. Now, I deload heavily from back squats for about 3 to 4 months. Some people might go, oh, you know what, that's excessive, this, that, and the other. One, it keeps me injury free, but there's another mechanism behind it. A lot of people in the general population as well, they'll have underlying, disc issues without even knowing it because they're not causing them any pain. If you had a severely herniated disc, not to the point where it requires surgery or, a huge amount of pain, but if you had, a significantly herniated disc, it's going to take you 3 to 4 months to completely recover. So my logic is, I've done my powerlifting comp, I'm not injured, this, that, and the other. Let's just pretend, I did have that style of injury, and how long would it take me to completely recover from that? So 3 to 4 months, is what it would take. So using that logic, it's like, I'm going to deload, I'm going to let my body get back to complete health, work a lot more on mobility and other things. But when I start my next competition block, I know in the back of my head, my body's in perfect nick. not some people, they keep pushing it the whole way through and their body breaks down in quite a dramatic way. And it's a really good way of, having a bit of balance in life. For the next 3 to 4 months, it's like, I'm still going to front squat, I'm still keeping the mass in my quads and everywhere else, but I don't have to go hard because I need my body to recover. But you also get that balance of, if I want to go hiking, I can go hike. If I miss a training session, I miss one. Because the goal is, if you're a happier person, you're going to last a lot longer in this sport. I've been competing in powerlifting since I was 16. I'm now 31. There's so many people that burn out over 3 to 4 years. They just they drop the sport completely. Versus in your off season, especially a deload, enjoy the time that you have. Still train, but view it more as each session is more a workout. You don't have anything overly specific in mind. Versus when your training is structured, being true training, you have set goals and everything leads on to the next session. With a workout, like anyone can write something down, do it as a workout just for fitness. It's just, one thing that they're trying to do in terms of they just want to have a good session. It's a workout versus training is structured and there's a methodical approach to it. In my off-season deload, I'm essentially just working out with the underlying goal of the training, if you so-called wish, just to maintain muscle mass, general strength, and slightly improve my mobility as well as my conditioning. So I get that from working out, and it's a lot less structured. So I can throw in little bits and pieces. I could do tire flips, I could smash the tire with a sledgehammer, I can do box jumps, I can do sprints, I can do whatever I want, because I'm just trying to hold general strength and conditioning while just deloading and enjoying life. And I've never found, deloading for that period of time to be an issue. Typically, I don't back squat for maybe 6 or so months of the year. It's sort of the 12 weeks. So I've got my comp prep, which is normally about 12 weeks. And then 12 weeks before that, it's like, okay, I'm going to start training again. I'm going to get all my movement patterns down. I'm going to take it a bit more serious in terms of, progression, and try and get everything on point. So from that standpoint, I'll take 12 weeks and then, I've built my weights up to a significant level. It's like, okay, let's start the comp prep now. I've got 12 weeks of really, really serious training where I try and minimize the amount of life influences on it. Training takes more or less top priority simply because, I'm a competitive person, but I have other goals in this sport which then help with, career development and the rest of it. So I have an invested interest. I sort of almost view those last 12 weeks as career progression because they also help me, with gaining clients, online coaching, all the rest of it, which really isn't relevant for a lot of people. So you don't have to take it, probably as serious as I do. But that's how I structure it. So I got 12 weeks of super intense structured training, 12 weeks prior to that. It's structured. If I need to miss a workout or two, so be it. And then, the 3 to 4 months before that, that's just leisure. Do what you want. Just work out, enjoy life, and train. I hope that answers the questions that you guys have put forward to me. If you guys haven't already, hit like and subscribe. Comment below if you guys have further questions because I'll try and do them as a Q&A. That's pretty much it. Hope you guys have a great day and stay well wherever you are.